Well, this is Pure 24/7 Radio, and I'm Nathan Thomas here with the wonderful Andy Godfrey for our movie reviews once again. Hello, Andy.
Hey Nathan, it's good to be with you. Last one of the year that we're going to
Yes,
do, I think. And wow, where has that year gone?
I
I,
know.
I, I was checking to date, and there are still a couple more films still to come out this year, so to be seen. So today I've seen 107 films at the cinema this year.
Wow.
A friend of mine messaged me this afternoon to say he'd seen something like 150, so I've got a bit of catching up to do. But I mean, we're going to talk about the best films of the year. That said, there are still a couple of films still to come out, including the new Robbie Williams biopic, Better Man, in which he's played by a chimp. Um, so we shall see what that's like. But yeah, I can't believe where the year's gone.
I know it is already, the new year is soon to be upon us, and this is the final movie reviews of 2024. It's been a great year. I've loved doing these, honestly. So great to hear about movies and your thoughts on the latest releases. But for this week's movie reviews, we wanted to look at your top 10 of 2024.
Okay, so we can do this. Can I just mention the worst five films of the year?
Oh yeah, do
Very,
that.
very, very quickly. So I'm not going to comment on these at all, but just to say, avoid Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, Madam Web, Borderlands, Drive Away Dolls, and Megaflopolis. Actually, it's called Megalopolis, but I called it Megaflopolis. so Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, Madam Web, Borderlands, Drive Away Dolls, Megaflopolis, all films to avoid. Just don't go anywhere near them. They flopped at the cinemas this year, and thankfully, rightly so, because they were all rubbish.
Okay.
So then we can get on to the good news now.
Yes.
So number 10. So last week, if you remember, we were talking about the fact that there was a new Lord of the Rings film coming
Mm.
out, and I was off to see it. Um, so back it was 2001 and 2002, 2003. Peter Jackson bought us the Lord of the Rings films. Then he bought us the Hobbit films, but they weren't quite as good or successful. But if you remember, we had those three great Christmases running where we went to Middle Earth, and we couldn't wait for Christmas to come around because we were going back to Middle Earth to get the next installment, see how Frodo and Sam were getting on, on their journey to destroy the ring. Those films were incredible. We've now got a new Lord of the Rings film there, and it's gone into my top 10 of the year. A very late entry. I saw it this week. It's an animated film. It's not a Tolkien story, but it's based on Tolkien characters, and I think Tolkien would have approved. So we meet the king of Rohan. His name is Helm, King Helm. Some wild men from the north come to challenge his kingdom. He and his people have to retreat into what we know now as Helm's Deep. And you'll remember Helm's Deep, the great fortress where the great battle took place in the Two Towers. That's a great scene where Gimli and the others are fighting, and Gandalf comes to the rescue. This is a story of his daughter, the king's daughter, Hedda. She is a feisty young lady who is friends with the Eagles. And again, you'll remember the role the Eagles played in Lord of the Rings. But the people have to retreat into Helm's Deep. They're under siege. I thought this was a wonderful film. The animation's a bit rough around the edges. It's sort of manga style. One of my friends said it reminded him of Scooby Doo. No, it didn't. It is not Scooby Doo. Let's get that absolutely clear. The animation's really good. Lots of battles. It's a 12A certificate. Lots of battles. If the animation is a bit rough around the edges, well, Middle Earth's a bit rough around the edges, and it's a good way perhaps to introduce younger children to the Middle Earth, to Middle Earth and the Lord of the Rings saga. It's set 200 years before Frodo's time. Lots of action, lots of battles, lots of pathos. The film's got real heart. Really interesting section in the middle, and it's no spoiler. There are two orcs that we meet in the middle of the film, and they are actually voiced by Merry and Pippin from the Lord of the Rings films, which is great. There's a bit of a surprise ending. I thought this was really, really good story. As I say, it's not a Tolkien original, but I felt Tolkien would have approved because they've treated his characters with respect. And, the film opens with the strains of Howard Shaw's great music from the Lord of the Rings films. And it's a different composer, Stephen Williams. But as soon as I heard that music, I was hooked. I was back in Middle Earth. I didn't care about the animation being a bit rough at times. I didn't care about the story. I was in Middle Earth, and that's where I wanted to be at Christmas. So it was really, really good. Great story about a feisty princess saving her people at Helm's Deep, and I thought that the animation was good. I thought that the story was good. So that's my number 10 film of the year. Very late entry, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, I thought it was good. And I think you would enjoy it because I know you're a Lord of the Rings fan. So try and see it on a big screen, because honestly, it's very rewarding to see it on a big screen. So that's number 10 this year. Number 9, film that came out earlier this year. Obviously, all of these films are going to be earlier this year. Another film in the Mad Max saga. So I was saying to you off air, we've had over 16 sequels this year. We've had Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, Despicable Me 4, Dune 2, Godzilla film, Kung Fu Panda 4, Beetlejuice, Venom: The Last Dance, Bad Boys Ride or Die, Kingdom of Planet of the Apes. We had Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire. We had Moana 2. We had Gladiator 2. You know, it's been a year of sequels, and I'm out of breath just listing them. But Mad Max Furiosa Mad Max was a film that came out in the summer. It was one of the big summer hits. Set in the world of Mad Max. So this is after the Third World War has devastated the planet. Petrol is a currency, as are ladies who can bear children, because the nuclear war affected childbirth. We've got a warlord who is seeking to find and raid other warlords for their petrol and for their women. It's an action-packed film, very, very loud soundtrack. I mean, I saw it on the super screen. Very loud soundtrack, gave me a headache. But the action is absolutely wonderful. It's a fantastic film, and really fits into the Mad Max saga. Anya Taylor-Joy stars in this. She's one of my favourite actresses. She was in a film called The Northman and was great. She was in Last Night in Soho, which is one of my top 10 films of all time. She's just a wonderful, wonderful actress. She can say so much just with expressions on her face. She doesn't actually have to speak. You know what she's thinking. She's a wonderful actress. So I've gone for Mad Max. I've gone for Furiosa, Mad Max at number 9, Mad Max. Number 8, you'll remember we talked about this on the show. I've gone for The Wild Robot. So another animated film. I mean, a number of animated films this year. Just mentioned Inside Out 2, which was great, but didn't make my top 10. So The Wild Robot is a story of this robot that gets washed up on a desert island. At first, all the animals are terrified of him. He's kind of like a walking, talking Alexa. And he's investigating everything, and he's picking up animals and looking at them and trying to get to come to terms with his environment. But eventually they become friends with him. And when the company sends another ship full of robots to get him back, the animals don't want him to go. And there's this big battle at the end. But it's a real animated film with play. The best animated films are those where you forget you're watching animation and you come to really care about the characters. That was so great about the new Lord of the Rings film, The War of the Rohirrim. Nightmare Before Christmas, we mentioned when we're doing our Christmas countdown, clay animated characters. But when you're watching animation, if you come to really love and care about the characters, that's a winner. And Wild Robot was just beautiful to look at. Had a superb soundtrack, was a really good story, felt original, and like nothing we'd seen all year, and really good animation. So that was good. Number 7, I've gone for another one of those sequels that I mentioned, but simply because it was so good. I've gone for Dune 2. So we're on, Frank Herbert wrote all these books about the planet Dune. It's actually called the planet Arrakis. It's its proper name. It's a sand planet where a certain spice is produced that controls. Everybody wants to control this planet, and there's fighting and warring over it. So picks up directly where Dune left off. Everybody talks about first films in series as Dune 1, Toy Story 1. It's not. It wasn't Jaws 1, it was Jaws. It's not Toy Story 1, it's Toy Story. So this picks up exactly where Dune left off. Great performances by Timothy Chalamet in the title role as excuse me, the possible Messiah, long prophesied Messiah of this planet. Obviously, we believe the truth that Jesus is the Messiah. This is a sort of fantasy. Frank Herbert was a well-known humanist. But it's a spectacular film. The planet is populated by worms. You've never seen worms like these. I mean, they fill the screen. Again, see it on a big screen. So at number 7, I've gone for Dune 2. Number 6, I've gone for a film called The Substance, which was a big smash hit. It's a body horror film. It's about a young lady, about an aging actress who's aware that she's getting older. The wrinkles are starting to appear on her face. Somebody offers her a substance which enables her for 1 week to grow a new, younger body and be somebody else. The condition is she has to go back to being her older self after a week. So she starts alternating 1 week as her older self, 1 week as her younger self. This is what this substance does. But then there's a conflict between the two. She wants to stay younger. She doesn't want to get older. But what's that going to do to her? It's a compelling, intriguing. Yes, it's a horror film, but it's a compelling, intriguing story, and it's got a lot to say about social media. It's got a lot to say about personality and celebrity. It's got a lot to say about this world in which we live, where nobody seems to want to grow old. Everybody wants to stay young. And is it all about looks? And so The Substance, I thought, was really good, really had a lot to say, and I really enjoyed it. Number 5, I've gone for The Bike Riders. So again, we talked about this on the show, if you remember. Back in the 1970s, a cameraman spent 2 years riding with a gang in America, bike riders gang, just taking photographs. And he published a book of these photographs. And they've taken that book and made it into a sort of semi-documentary film. With actors playing the bike riders. Just a wonderful insight into the lifestyle of these guys. It's a little bit violent in one point, but, these are gangs of bike riders. And it's a really compelling insight into how these guys live, just going from town to town on their bikes with their girlfriends. All that matters is the bikes, and this is their world. And I thought it was just a wonderful, wonderful, terrific film. Number 4, I'm going to get shot down for this because I'm going to say this is the best family film of the year. Other people will say Inside Out 2, which, as I say, is very good, and Wild Robot, which is very good. But I've gone for Harold and the Purple Crayon. So you might remember we talked about this. There was a series of books in the 50s about Harold, a young boy who lives in a He's a cartoon character. He's got a purple crayon. Whatever he draws, if he draws a plane appears. If he draws a house appears. And one day the film starts off, we're in this little magical world with this little fantasy character drawing things with his purple crayon. He draws some friends, a raccoon friend and a rabbit friend. And one day he hears a voice. And the voice says, "Thank you so much for all the pleasure you brought me." And he thinks, hang on, is that God or is that my dad? Maybe that's my dad. And he draws with his purple crayon a door, and he writes above it the word exit. And he goes through this, and he finds himself in the real world, in our world. Now, he's played in the real world, he comes out as a fully grown up man with a boy's mentality. And he starts drawing things, And he meets a young boy, and he says to this young boy, "Can you help me find my dad?" And it's very quickly realised that they need to find the author of these books. Zoe Deschanel plays the young boy's mum, who he finds. She is brilliant. I mean, he's got a thing for blueberry pie. And she comes down one day, and their kitchen is full of blueberry pie, and she can't understand where all these blueberry pies are coming from. He's just been drawing blueberry pies. It's a very, very funny film. There's a bit of action, Lord of the Rings type style action, actually, at the end. There's a scene halfway through the end credits, which again took me back to Middle Earth, but it's really, really good fun. I mean, it's a PG. It's just the family film of the year. It's called Harold and the Purple Crayon. A lot of people that I know, my friends, fellow colleagues, fellow film critics, will not have this in their top 10 at all. Okay, but I'm unashamed to put it in my top 10 because I just enjoyed it. I just absolutely loved every minute. So we're getting towards the top 3 now. So number 3, and we've talked about this a lot. Number 3 is the very first film I saw this year, all the way back in January. And I've seen over 100 films at the cinema this year. This was the very first film I saw. And it's a Christmas film. It's called The Holdovers. So if you remember, Paul, we said that Paul Giamatti won the Oscar for best performance in this. Basically, we are in a boarding school in Boston where some of the kids have to stay for Christmas. And one of the teachers has drawn the short straw that he has to stay in the school over Christmas to look after these kids. And he's grumpy about it, as you would be. He's grouchy, you know. He's a really sort of mean, miserable character. And he doesn't like these kids. But slowly and surely, as Christmas comes and goes, he forms a relationship with one of them. And it's just special. It's just magical. For the very, this doesn't happen very often, but the very first film I see in the year is in my top 3 by the end of the year, because you think, you know, there's going to be so many more films, but it stayed with me. I bought the Blu-ray. It is a magical, magical film. The Holdovers, and one for Christmas as well. So top 2, number 2, Thelma. Now, I don't know if you remember this one. I saw this on my birthday back in August, and I saw it at one of my favourite cinemas, which is the Watershed Cinema in Bristol. They've basically taken a big old warehouse and turned it into a several-screen cinema. It's just a fabulous cinema. And I saw it on one of the smaller screens with a group of people. Now, normally, when I'm in the cinema, I want total quiet. I don't want people shouting out and talking while the film's going on, okay? But this film, Thelma, was so funny that people were actually interacting with the characters on the screen, you know, and I didn't mind. There's one point where so we are in an old people's territory, okay? Thelma is a 95-year-old grandmother played by 95-year-old actress June Squibb, who's brilliant, and she's been conned. She's been conned out of her money, and she decides to go after the bad guys, right? Now, the bad guy is played by Roddy McDowall. She decides to go after the bad guys, and she goes after them on a mobility scooter. So basically, think Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise as a 96-year-old, you know, 95-year-old. There's one point where we're in an old people's home, and the old people are putting on a play, and somebody says, break a leg. And somebody in the audience that I was watching, they said, no, don't say that. They probably will break a leg, you know. It's that kind of film. It's very, very funny. Very powerful. It's got a lot to say about old people. It's got a lot to say about dementia and people who are suffering. It's got a lot to say about loneliness in old age. But it's a very, very funny film. It's like Mission Impossible it's like James Bond when he's 96, you know, going on a mission. I mean, it is just wonderful. And for a long time, I thought nothing is going to touch that. That's going to be my number 1 film of the year. But then a few weeks ago, and you'll know what's coming, but a few weeks ago, Wicked came out. Now, I've seen Wicked twice. It's 2 hours, 40 minutes long. I went to see the stage show 2 days before I went to see the film. The film is so clever. Wicked, now we've been saying that Wicked is about how the Wicked Witch of the West in the land of Oz, who Dorothy eventually kills, became wicked. Actually, I do need to put a little proviso in here, because it's about so much more than that. It's really, seeing it again the second time, I realised it's actually about something wicked happening in Oz that needs to be put right. So let's just clear that up. It is about how the Wicked Witch of the West became the Wicked Witch of the West, but it's about something terrible happening in Oz that actually needs to be put right. And you can actually have a great deal of sympathy for the motivation of the Wicked Witch of the West in this. And I'm not going to say any more about the plot for those who haven't seen it. Absolutely banging tunes. Absolutely. I mean, the songs are by Stephen Sondheim. You need to play them. I mean, the soundtrack, I've been living off the soundtrack for the last couple of weeks. A song called Defying Gravity, which finishes the film. Now, remember, it's only part 1. This is just act 1 of the show. The show's 2 hours, 40 minutes. This film's 2 hours, 40 minutes. But it's not baggy. It's really great. And there's a song which Stephen Sondheim wrote to be a showstopper for the end of Act 1. And it's called Defying Gravity. It is just, oh man, it is an awesome song. So I loved it so much, I made it my number 1 film of the year. I think I will have that in common with some other critics. I think I've got some films in here that other critics, I haven't seen Mark Commode's list yet, or other critics, but I think I've got some films in here that other critics will have. Certainly Wild Robot, certainly Substance, certainly The Holdovers. And I think a lot of critics will have Wicked in their top 10 of the year. There are other films, I mean, we've had some really, really good faith-based films this year, which would make my top 15. So we've had Sound of Hope, which was this Possum Trot story of a church in America where everybody adopted orphans. They adopted over 70 orphans. That's a wonderful, wonderful film. We had Cabrini from Angel Studios again, which same people who gave us The Chosen. Cabrini's a story of a nun who went to New York in 1880, founded an orphanage, and ended up founding orphanages all over the world. That's a wonderful film. We've had Kingdom of Planet of the Apes. That nearly got in. The Fall Guy, which is about a stuntman being framed for murder, that nearly got in. Small Things Like These. Remember we talked about that, which was the one set in Dublin where bad things are happening at a convent at Christmas time. Civil War would be number 11. Film starring Kirsten Dunst, set in the future where America is at civil war. So, all told, I think it's been a good year. I mean, it's been a year of sequels. A couple of them made my top 10. But we've had some really good original new stuff. I mean, we had a new Alien film. That's another sequel, but it was good. And so there you go. And all of these, I mean, I think 9 of my top 10 are already available streaming to watch at home. They are available to, buy on Blu-ray and DVD. And I've got most of them already in my Blu-ray collection. Lord of the Rings only just come out this last week, so that won't be available just yet. But at 10, Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, 9, Furiosa, Mad Max Fury Road, 8, Wild Robot, 7, Dune 2, 6, The Substance, 5, Bike Riders, 4, Harold and the Purple Crayon, 3, The Holdovers, 2, Thelma, and 1, Wicked. And I just wonder if this time next year, Wicked Part 2 will be number 1. There you go. I have talked and talked, but those are my top 10 of the year.
Wow. Thanks so much, Andy. There's some great films in there, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of them. I haven't seen a lot of those yet, but thank you so much for giving us your top 10 of 2024, and we can't wait to see what comes out in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of. I mean, I don't want to give away any spoil. We've got a new film. We've got another pop biopic. It's going to be one of the first films of next year on Bob Dylan. So we've got the Bob Dylan story. So we've got the Robbie Williams story still to come this year, in which he's played by a chimp, or he's played as a CGI chimp. There is talk of another Ghostbusters film next year. Unfortunately, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire this year was terrible, so I'm not holding out much hope. There's talk of another Toy Story film next year,
Really?
which would be Toy Story 5. Yeah, that apparently is happening. And hopefully next year, we will also get, finally, the sequel to Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, which, rumour has it, is based on the book of Acts in the Bible. Now, there has been, I mean, Passion of the Christ, my father was still alive, so it's at least 14 years old. My dad died 14 years ago New Year, 15 years ago New Year. And I remember going to the cinema with my dad to see Passion of the Christ. And it finishes with the resurrection, which I was thrilled about. But and ever since there's been talk of the sequel. Well, it hasn't materialized yet. But hopefully next year we will get Passion of the Christ. So we will see.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Andy. Great to speak to you once again. And thank you for bringing us your top 10 movies of 2024.
Absolute pleasure, Nathan. I look forward to seeing you in the new year. And we'll do it all over again.
Absolutely.
God bless you, and God bless Pure.